Tehachapi time, Maya Acosta joined today by some members of our Friends of the Depot board, and we're very excited to learn more about all things happening at the Depot Museum and just some fun railroad history. So joining me, we have President Diana Buerge, Vice President Marlon Woodside, and special guest Bob Alvis, who is a railroad historian and is going to be featured at one of the upcoming FOTD board membership meetings. So thank you all for being here and welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Good morning.
Of course. So before we get into what we can expect at the upcoming membership meeting, Marlon, tell me a little bit about what has been going on with FOTD. What's new over at the Depot?
Well, we've had a great opportunity to reach out to the community, and the Kiwanis Club had their first Youth Initiative Expo this past Saturday at the Tehachapi Community Church Fellowship Hall. There were 18 vendors, of which we were one, as I mentioned, and this was focusing on the age group of 12 to 18-year-olds with the idea of getting them involved in their community to support through volunteer activities. So that was a great opportunity. And then also we were fortunate to have a couple of artists from the Tehachapi Art Commission Art 24 art show program. We had Damien Kinsella, who I understand actually grew up here in this area and now lives down in L.A., and Lynn Bennett. Both of them were actually posted. Lynn was outside and Damien inside. And that art show, the results of that art show will be on a special meeting on the 21st of July at the Aspen Builder Activity Center. And then a general public invite on the 22nd and 23rd, that Saturday and Sunday. And then this coming weekend, on the 25th of May, we're going to have our YouTube star Mark McGowan operate the Stoco signal collection out in front of the depot at 1 p.m. Of course, we're open from 11 a.m. to 4 on that day, but certainly be prepared at 1 o'clock to attend that. There were about 70 people the last time we were there. And then I might throw it over to Diana to expand a little bit on that.
Okay. As Marlon said, Mark McGowan is going to be doing it, and a lot of people know him from YouTube. He was actually one of the signalers with UP that worked in the depot building before it was remodeled and then rebuilt. He will be describing each of the signals and what they do. And Doug Picard will be in the electrical room turning them on and off. So he was our first president of the Friends of the Tehachapi Depot and very involved, led the remodel of the building. We're also going to try and have another one in Labor Day weekend.
Awesome. And this is a fairly unique, or I guess unique would be the word, opportunity for individuals to come out and experience maybe what more the railroad operations would have been like kind of back in the day.
Exactly. The signals don't run automatically. They have to be run by humans. And so that we don't do this very often. So come out and check it out.
Very cool. And I hear you guys also have some openings on the curator team. Can you tell me a bit more about that and what those roles entail?
One of the big things we do is collect artifacts that people donate to us, and we have to research it to see if it is qualified to be in our museum because it ran on our rail lines. Research it, fix it up if we need to, decide if we need to have it, catalog it. So there's a lot. We are looking for a curator to oversee all of that. We need a librarian to help us catalog and archive everything, a photographer to do some research on it. We have a lot of positions open. If anybody has that kind of interest and experience, we would love to have you come down.
Awesome. And how can people, if they're interested in being involved, how can they reach out to you guys?
Our phone number, of course, is 661-823-1100. We have, I would suggest, FOTDmuseum@gmail.com would be a good email to reach out to.
Okay. And I hear you guys have a new website as well. How is that going?
It's going great.
Good.
Very excited about it. We've been working with Golden Hills IT, and we will be having new email addresses. But for right now, use that one. Or try out the new one, President at tehachapidepot.com. That will come directly to me.
Very cool. All right. And we're here today to talk a bit about your upcoming meeting, which is on June 11th. So tell us a bit about that. We have Bob that is going to be giving a presentation. What can we expect? Why is this meeting unique?
Well, this meeting is our first opportunity to invite the general public. In the past, it has been a kind of a benefit, if you will, of membership for the Friends of the Tehachapi Depot. But again, as Diana mentioned, the phone number of 661-823-1100, we're asking for RSVPs, if you would, so we can get a head count to have food available. There's no cost associated with this, but Bob will probably mention the fact that he does have a following in the Antelope Valley area there, so we're hoping people listening to the podcast might be able to recognize Bob and be interested in coming to the meeting to hear his presentation on 11 June, Tuesday at 6 p.m.
Awesome. That sounds exciting. Now, Bob, can you give us a little bit of a preview, what people can expect? What are some of the topics that you'll be diving into at this board meeting?
Well, being an individual that's followed railroading in the Antelope Valley since I was a little kid, born here in 54, and just being passionate about everything railroad, history has been a big aspect of railroading in the Antelope Valley and the Tehachapi region and all of Southern California. So I've been kind of a student that's just enjoyed the subject matter. And one of the big things I like to do is share. You know, sharing history is one of those great things you get to do with the general public, because you get to educate and you get to bring to light things that people may not even know about. And when it comes to railroading, whether, you know, up here in Tehachapi, where it's an iconic fixture of your landscape here, railroading and Tehachapi are like, it should be in the National Archives back in Washington, D.C. It's that important. So, but the Antelope Valley and different aspects of railroading through history has been very, very interesting, very colorful, and very fan-based, and has a lot of people come to it, and then all of a sudden they realize, man, this is great subject matter, and they like to learn and see what went on in past generations and what life was like, which is kind of like, speaks to like the Tehachapi Railway Museum. When you have a museum like that where people come and visit, and then they're immersed into the history of the area, it just opens up a whole world for them, to where hopefully it will inspire them to want to learn more and be included, you know, their family and friends and things like that stuff, and kind of grow that passion for what that history is. So that's kind of what I do and stuff, you know, and that's how I kind of got where I am today.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I hope we will find in your presentation, Bob, is the history of where most people think that Santa Fe built that line from Mojave to Boron, and elaborate on that a little bit there, because of that transition of where the railroad, Santa Fe gets on to Mojave, BNSF now, and then goes up to Bakersfield. So explain a little of that.
Yeah, my presentation is on that alignment that went from Mojave to Boron, that was abandoned in the early 1950s when the Air Force showed up and said they no longer wanted the railroad running across Rogers Dry Lake and interfere with their flight test profiles that they were having out there. So that line was abandoned, but people don't realize that alignment is pretty much all there, and it carried along 4 to 5 actual railroad stations that ran through that on that very short run of deal and stuff. We had Sanborn, Bissell, Fleur, Yucca, which became Muroc, which became Edwards Air Force Base, and then we had Clay, and then we had Rodriguez, and then we had Boron. So you had all these stations on there, and over time I've had the fun of going out and exploring these locations and documenting a lot of the stuff there, and you can actually walk that old railroad alignment. But then when you start doing the research of that and each one of those stations and the locations there, and when you walk out to Bissell, for instance, where there was quite a little big operation going on out there, and you can still go out there and find a lot of the foundations to the buildings and the water towers, and you kind of put yourself back into that. I call it history walking, to where could you just imagine what it would be like back in those days? And, you know, when you realize that railroad alignment there was the original Southern Pacific alignment from Mojave to Needles, and then through time and morphing, you know, the Atlantic and Pacific, which was coming from the east to California, needed an entrance into California, and they became part of that operation. So the Atlantic and Pacific and the Southern Pacific came to agreement. They formed a partnership there, and the AMP came as far as Mojave. So you have that original late 1800s alignment of those old 10-wheelers, rolling across the desert there. Lots of great history there. And then when the merger of Santa Fe joined in, Southern Pacific found there was a partnership to be had there to help with even their operations over Tehachapi. And it grew from there. And for many years, that was the alignment that went across from Mojave to there, not the alignment today that parallels the 58 freeway there. So lots of history to be had there, and through visuals and pictures I have of locations and history of the stations, and it's amazing when you think back that each one of those stations were connected to an individual. For instance, Bissell and Fleur were all Santa Fe men that the stations were actually named after, and that was something that Santa Fe railroads and a lot of railroads did. And it's hard over time to think that those names fall into the abyss of history and are never spoken again. And people don't realize that it was a place of honor for a lot of these guys to have a railroad station named after you. And now they're just, spots covered by sagebrush, And so we try to elaborate. I do have a couple pictures of these guys from the 1800s and what they were like. But I also have a lot of other historical photos that I can show that play to that, and cool things that I found out there. And unfortunately, the areas on Edwards Air Force Base proper are hard to access now. But thank God in the 80s and 90s, where I had a lot of ability to go out there and explore, I've got to document stuff.
I think that's going to be one of the appeals to the listeners of this podcast. If you work out at Edwards Air Force Base, for example, the old, if I've got it correct here, the old road going to the dump, so to speak, was a part of that alignment.
Oh, it was, yeah.
So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, it would be interesting to come and listen to Bob's presentation.
Yeah, and that's areas that you can actually explore on your own. It is not private property per se. There are some areas you don't want to go to. You can't get on the base anymore. But and it's neat to walk that old alignment. And there's one section there and stuff. They still have the signal block bases, all still sitting out there in the desert, never to work again, and hold up the semaphores and everything that was going across the desert there. But there are things to explore and discover, and my presentation hopefully inspires people to take that time and get out there and do that history walk and walk in the presence of all that history. One of the things I it's really hard to deal with in my world is the missing pictures that are in family albums, photo albums all across America. And the internet has opened up a great window into our history. But some pictures are still elusive for us. And one of the pictures that has eluded me for so long is a decent picture of that railroad alignment that goes across Rogers Dry Lake. I know there has to have been pictures taken of trains going across that dry lake bed with the old Santa Fe steam locomotives and passenger trains that travel that on a daily basis. And go ahead.
Well, for those at Edwards, for example, if I recall correctly, the test pilot school, there's kind of an alignment there where that fuel tank is.
Yes.
So that was part of that old alignment that he was referring to. So if you're a frequenter of Edwards Air Force Base, he'll enlighten you on some of those things.
Yeah, and George, who is the curator of the Flight Test Historical Museum at Edwards, George Welch, who lives in Tehachapi here, he's been very gracious to me, and he's invited me to go to the original location of the Muroc train station and walk those grounds. So one of these days I'm hoping to make that happen. But I do have a couple pictures there from that Muroc station looking out over the dry lake bed, and you can see the lines dip down and go across that lake bed. And some of those pictures are they're out there. I know they're out there.
Well, if I got my location correct, when you do access the base from the north entrance there going off of 58 into Edwards, that underpass, that's where the station was located, wasn't it?
That was the second station, okay, because when they had the realignment across the dry lake bed, they moved it to there, which that's another location that's fun to see. Santa Fe, or BNSF now, is very sensitive about railroad operations and stuff. But the minute they find out I'm a railroad geek, they sit there and we end up talking, and you're okay and stuff. The foundation is still out there to that original station. I have pictures that I share of that station there, which we call the Zephyr Station, because everybody knows on the high desert and that location on a hilltop north of Edwards Air Force Base, the winds are pretty ruthless. So let's just put it that. But you're right. The original Muroc Station, which was at Yucca, then it became Rodriguez because it was Rodriguez Dry Lake, and then everybody knows the story of Muroc and how it got its name because it was the Quorum family, and Santa Fe already had a Quorum family, or a Quorum state. A quorum station, okay. And so the family just reversed the letters of their name and made it Muroc. So that Muroc is quorum spelled backwards, which was the deal. So that's the way they got around that. Well, there you go. So that's how that station got it. And then when the railroad came in alignment, and the railroad servicing Edwards Air Force Base there, or Muroc back in those days, was a big critical, especially during the war years, World War II. People don't realize the first American jet, the P-59, was delivered by rail car to Edwards at Muroc Air Force.
With a wooden prop on the front.
With a wooden prop on the front. It came by flat car and box car all the way from Bell, New York, and across the country, and it was a top secret move, which is a program all in itself. I could do something like that, but there's a lot of history tied into that. And the Air Force is actually looking at reopening those lines into Edwards to continue to service it, because they're having more programs coming in that they could utilize rail access to so they actually had BNSF went out and evaluated to see what lines could be put back into
the old
operation.
Loopman's Ridge, where the research lab now, or the rocket lab back in the day, there was a whole network of Santa Fe tracks.
I know. And my youngest daughter works up at the rocket site there, and I've been blessed to work over there the years and stuff. And that is an active line up there, and they still get rail deliveries up there. And there's a lot of history up there too that sits up there. The old hydrogen cars that they used, which were very unique. There's a string of those sitting on a siding up there that George at the Flight Test Museum is going to get one of those for their museum someday. So that's kind of a cool thing. But they still utilize those cars for storing nitrogen now instead of hydrogen. So anyway, that's a lot of America's rocket space program was delivered to that mountaintop via the railroad up there.
So we're hoping that a lot of these points have piqued your interest there, and I would certainly imagine Bob is going to entertain questions at the end of this presentation.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's hard
so
to
if you ever wonder, I wonder what that was all about, here's your chance to ask Bob, the expert.
Yeah, very interesting.
I appreciate it. It's hard to say the word expert and my name in the same line, but I do my best. Okay. So there you go. So anything else?
Well, I would think that this would be a nice opportunity to give Bob a moment to discuss his other venture there at the Lancaster Fairgrounds.
Yes, very passionate about the Antelope Valley Rural Museum, which is at the Antelope Valley Fairgrounds. That is a program museum that has been a passion of so many in the Antelope Valley to carry on the legacy and the history of the Antelope Valley. And of course, I'm knee deep in that via railroad, aviation, farming, growing up there. We were just joking kind of before that. I posted a picture of cruising Lancaster Boulevard back in the 1960s, and that was our American graffiti. But even things as simple as that have a meaning to past generations to come out and remember those days, which are hard to come by. So you go to that museum there. It's open on the Saturdays during the month. You can go to their website, AntelopeValleyRuralMuseum.com, and you can find out when they're available or when they're open. For now, it's just on the weekends, and you can take tour schools and kids show up there. And in any big event at the fairground, like the Poppy or the fair or other events that go on there, it's open to the public there. And when you go in there, it is an absolute gorgeous facility. When you look at the displays, you can see that people have a passion for the history. And it carries on from the days of early Indians in the Antelope Valley to aerospace and space shuttles and everything in between. Of course, I always, we're getting ready to expand our railroad footprint in there a little bit more, because Lancaster and the Antelope Valley would not really exist if not for the railroad, coming of the railroad in the 1870s. Because when they ran that line across the Antelope Valley, Lancaster was one of those first water stops that they sunk in the desert. And all we had was Lancaster and Alpine up by Vincent Hill now. And so I always tell everybody, they go like, well, what's the oldest surviving business in the Antelope Valley? And everybody wants to say, well, it's Muma's Funeral Home, or it's PCA or something like that. I said, no, it's the railroad. And they don't look at the railroad as being that business, and it was. And so our museum kind of reflects that, and we have historical items that we share there. But I can't even begin to expand on, when you go in there, it's everything. It's everything from the high schools, from the people that lived in the community, the leadership over history, everything that's happened there, the aerospace history. It's just, you just immerse yourself in so much subject matter that is so well presented. And the people that docent the museum are passionate about what they are, and they want to share. And you can go in there and just immerse yourself in some great Antelope Valley history.
Yeah.
So, and what hours are they open?
On Saturdays,
when they are open?
Yeah, on Saturdays, it's usually like 10 to 4 on Saturdays, so you can go up there. And what's nice is, you drive around to Gate 3, and you get to drive right into the fairgrounds there. You don't have to park way out in the front and walk 100 miles to get to it. So if you can drive right up to the museum there, and you can't miss it, because when you drive up to it, all the outside memorabilia of Antelope Valley history is there on display, from tractors and trucks and drilling machines and agricultural equipment. It's just, you look around and you see what built the Antelope Valley. You see what was the groundswell of the pioneers that came and what they were all about. We have an almond sorter there, and a lot of people don't realize the Godey family, came from Germany, and they were the ones that got the almonds to a point where Antelope Valley for a long time was the number one almond producing region in the United States. And people don't realize that. And when you look at that almond sorter shaker machine, you go like, how in the world could they have harvested gazillions of almonds with that old wooden rust bucket that was just looked like it was put together in some kid's nightmare erector set project, So, but it's there, and you just look at it and you go like, oh my gosh, this has such a huge impact on American history and our Antelope Valley history, and tells a story of the immigrants that came to the Antelope Valley. It wasn't just all about alfalfa and sugar beets and onions back in the day. It was about almonds, and we were a big stuff. But that museum pays much tribute and honor to those families that came in those early days and got those industries going. So,
do you have any jackalopes actually there?
The jackalope. Let's talk about that jackalope and stuff. It's the same as Bigfoot, right? It's fun. It's fun banter, and we have pictures of jackalopes in there, but we don't have any, shall we say, taxidermied jackalope sitting on a wall anywhere and things like that. But, once again, it's like snipe hunting. I don't know if you know what snipe hunting was. Antelope Valley was notorious for snipe hunting, bringing in the newbies and taking them out in the desert. And it's like hunting jackalope. It would be like snipe hunting. So, but anyway, it's an iconic, it's a story. It's an Antelope Valley story, and we really enjoy it. Some people believe in them. Some of us are like, okay, we'll take it for its face value, so we'll just leave it at that. So.
I had the chance to go out during the Poppy Festival, and I visited the museum, and as you're saying, it is very well curated, very interesting to see, the start of Lancaster, the Antelope Valley, from kind of not much of anything to the railroad, and then now, as you're saying, we've got the most amazing aerospace testing out in Mojave, and it's the progression of technology and the growth of the area is just amazing.
Right.
And it was very interesting to me. I think I spent probably about an hour in there. Usually I'm kind of a speed runner of museums.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot there. And when people come in there and they see John Wayne and they say Judy Garland, and they go like, what's going on here? And knowing that John Wayne, lived off of Avenue L and Sierra Highway there and attended the elementary school there. And then Judy Garland in the 1920s and early 30s, before she became Dorothy and flew off to Oz, she grew up there, and her house is still there in the Antelope Valley. And
the Gum sisters.
No,
right?
the Gum, Judy Gum, Frances Gum. Frances Ethel Gum, and her sisters were there, and they used to perform at the Antelope Valley Theater down there on Old Sierra Highway, and her dad was a vaudevillian music man, and they would dance and sing, and she was discovered, and people, I don't know why the Antelope Valley never really embraced the yellow brick road, but there's one thing that's kind of cool. I just did a story on about a week ago. Was in the 1920s, Judy Garland and her friend Irma Babe Story, who went on to become a WASP in World War II, very famous Antelope Valley woman pilot. They were kids, and they were pouring the new sidewalks, and Frances Judy Garland stepped in the wet cement and left her footprints in cement there in the 1928, 29. Wow. And that somebody, they never took it out. They left her footprints in the cement there. And little did we know that, later on, she would end up putting her feet in cement, down in Hollywood. And those footprints in that cement were cut out and actually taken over to the Western Hotel on Lancaster Boulevard. So you can go in the back courtyard garden area and stuff, and there's Judy's little footprints in the cement there. So once again, these little stories that just can attract so much interest, and it's fun to discover things like that and the history there. So anyway.
Well, speaking of interest, if Bob Alvis' name sounds familiar to you, he is a contributor to the local Loop newspaper on various occasions.
Yes, I enjoy writing for them. They came to me and said, hey, do you think you could feed me some articles every once in a while? And I said, well, absolutely. I love Tehachapi. Back in the 60s, my sister lived up here, and I was one of those lucky kids that my parents were not very, how would I say it, they let me roam. Let me just put it that way. They let me roam. And we had friends, Bud Dunn, who worked for the Southern Pacific, that was at Lancaster. He ended up getting moved up to Bakersfield. And my parents, at a young age, had no problem, because I'd run around with his son, putting me on the Southern Pacific Daylight in Lancaster and let me ride the train up to Bakersfield all by myself. I was probably about 12 years old, and they had no problem with me just getting on that train and going up there and coming back. And then years later, when I got into high school or even middle school, I would go down and buy my $14 round trip ticket to Bakersfield. And I'd tell my mom and dad and stuff, hey, I'm going to go down to the station. I'm going to ride the train up to Bakersfield and back. And I would ride the train up to Bakersfield there, and we'd get off, and I'd walk across. There was a cafe across the tracks to the north, and I'd go in there and get me a burger and fries and things like that. And so we got there at 11 o'clock, and then the return train was about 1 o'clock. So I had 2 hours to just play around in the Bakersfield rail yard and see if I could get in some kind of trouble. And I would catch the train back. But what a joy. I was riding on those old daylights that had like 2 or 3 passenger cars on it and an automat car. Everybody knows what an automat car is, probably the railroad people. And I got to be friends with the conductors on the trains and things like that. So, this was the gift. This was the gift of growing up in this region and being a railroad fan. And this is why now I look back on that time period, and it's just, I love to share it because it was so special to me. And I just wish a lot of people, I dang wish that old daylight was still running between Lancaster and Bobdale.
You can get on that bus now.
Oh, yes,
but you know what? But they're going to have a hard time getting that bus through that bottom tunnel on the loop, and stuff. It's all about experiencing that loop, and the ride was just the best, and those were good times. Those are really good times, and I was blessed to live those. So.
Very good stuff, Bob. It sounds like you're a wealth of information that hopefully everybody listening in here, you piqued their interest with something or another with all these interesting tidbits.
And I just want to make one more. It's on the Loop newspaper there. The articles that I do submit there are very expansive. I do railroad articles every once in a while, but like the last article I wrote for them, I think they published it. Yeah, or stuff was when I was a kid. They'd filmed the Rat Patrol TV show down on Roseman Dry Lake, and my parents would take us out and drop us off and let us hang out when they were filming the TV shows. And I got to share those memories and some of the pictures that I took when I was a kid. Those were special times also. So don't think you're just going to get Railroad Bob in the Loop newspaper. You're going to get these other aspects too and stuff.
Very cool.
Okay.
All right. Diana, Marlon, anything else FOTD Depot Museum related that we want to touch on?
I do. First of all, I'm hoping that people are right now looking for pictures for that line from Boron.
Boy, that would be Christmas comes early for Bob.
And if you find any, bring them to the depot at the meeting on June 11th at 6 p.m.
Amen to that.
Okay. Also, we are going to be one of the recipients of the Cheers for Charity donation this year. So I hope everyone is buying their tickets. That event is August 10th, Saturday at Aviator Park. You can go on to their website and choose tickets. When you get to the point where it says checkout, it will give you an option to buy your ticket on behalf of one of the charities that are going to be recipients. So, of course, I hope you pick Friends of the Tehachapi Depot, but any of those charities are very well deserving of this.
Very exciting. A great cause to donate to and to continue to support the local history, railroad history, whatever it may be right here in Tehachapi. So,
and it's a wonderful evening.
Yes, absolutely.
And I'd like to conclude by saying that if any of this information has passed you by, we will be at the farmers market on Thursdays from 4 to 7. And we'll be located, if I understand correctly, in front of the BK Theater.
I think so.
We'll have a little booth there, so please drop on by and ask us any more details about what we've discussed today.
Yes. Absolutely.
And that starts June 6th, the farmers market.
June 6th. All right. Did I say July?
Oh, I don't know. I don't.
Okay.
Just to clarify for
Okay,
everybody.
just to clarify. Okay.
Because I'm personally very excited for the farmers market. But yes,
definitely.
wonderful opportunity to connect with you guys.
And then one more, if you are going to come to the meeting in June to see Bob and bring your pictures, please give us a call to RSVP at 661-823-1100, or you can reach Marlon at Vice President at TehachapiDepot.com, or myself, President at TehachapiDepot.com.
Perfect. All right. Lots to take in here from this episode, and hopefully everybody is looking at joining you guys for this membership meeting. Thank you all for coming in today. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Anybody listening, if you have any questions or comments, you can always email us, media@TehachapiCityHall.com, and we can get those questions to the right place. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you back here next time on Tehachapod.